Okay. Here's the thing about me and romance anime. I don't go out of my way to watch them. Now, why is that? Well, to me, it's because they usually fall into one of two camps. Either they are boring and generic, trying to tug on your heartstrings unsuccessfully, or they are beautiful and breathtaking, but feel like that they've taken your heartstrings, attached it to a rocket, sent the rocket up into space, taking you along with it, which rips those heartstrings out of your chest, disconnecting you from said rocket millions of miles above sea level, where you lose consciousness due to lack of oxygen, and eventually disintegrate when your body makes contact with the ground. There is a certain level of awesome bliss included in this experience, to be sure, but I generally avoid it for fear of, well, you know, pain.
Pain. Lots of pain.
Now, normally when comedy is involved along with the element of romance, I become less worried about that whole stratosphere dive thing and more worried that the show is just going to be shit. Because for me, comedy and anime are weird, mainly because I'm a foreigner and there are a lot of things about Japanese humor that I just don't get because of cultural differences. But it's also weird because that good balance between comedy and romance, even in English media, is a tricky one that very few shows get right. So to start off this year's review week of Awesome, my humble viewers have decided that I shall be watching my teen romantic comedy, SNAFU. A series which, to be honest, I wasn't too enthused about going into, for reasons you may have been able to figure out because of the previous analogies. But hey, I'm willing to give most shows the benefit of the doubt, so I watched it. And I will say, the title was a little misleading for me. Ladies, gentlemen, and others, my name is Arcada, and welcome to Glass Reflection. Today, the 2013 anime from Studio Brainsbase, my teen romantic comedy, SNAFU. Let's jam. To start off, because you can't have a romantic comedy outside of high school, that is where, of course, the series takes place. Added bonus is that we also get the addition of the after-school club for all the romance to occur in. Except we don't. Firstly, the after-school club in question is kind of unique. It's called the Volunteer Service Club, and its members take problems from the student body and through intellect and witty humor, solve said problems to the best of their abilities. Secondly, while yes, there are romantic elements and subplots, they were never really the focus, which is intriguing to me, and also why I think I was slightly misled by the title. Our main character, Hachiman, is a guy who doesn't really give two shits about much. He's a self-proclaimed loner of a student who takes a pessimistic attitude towards almost everything. In other words, he and I are gonna get along great. He is forced by one of his teachers to join the aforementioned club as a kind of punishment for his snarky and aloof attitude, thus giving the club president, Yukino, the task of trying to improve his attitude. For what it's worth. The reason this even has a chance of happening is because of how similar Hachiman and Yukino are, even though neither will admit to it. On the surface, they seem completely different. One is an angsty loner, and the other one is the model student, but they are both intelligent people who don't really feel the need to socialize with the rest of the student body. So forcing them together almost seems like it's helping her just as much as it's helping him, which I do believe to be the point. It also means that the teacher is either brilliant or a complete idiot. I'm inclined to lean towards the former because she wears a lab coat all the time, and lab coats are badass. Son of a bitch. Now, the story is not about them. They are the lead characters, yes, and we see the world through their eyes. Also, yes, but it is very rare that they are the focus of any individual story arc. Instead, what we get to see are the stories of the club's various patrons, as it were. Stories of students who come to the club with requests and problems that the dynamic duo and the club's bubbly third member, Yui, must solve. Of course, all of these problems do in some way tie into the main character's personal arcs, but it is never obvious when it does so. They grow gradually, over time, with each passing solved problem. Now, I wouldn't say that by the end, Hachiman's attitude has completely changed, but there does feel to be some semblance of realistic growth to it, at least by the end of season 1. Hachiman as a character actually reminds me a lot of Hotaro from Hyoka, as they both have similar views on life. They just go about it in different ways. They both have the mindset that they live in worlds that are not necessarily what they seem. If you've watched Hyoka, you might recall that Hotaro calls it a rose-colored life, one that he would rather avoid if at all possible. Hachiman, though, takes this further by insinuating that his rose-colored life is a facade. His classmates are like actors trying to live out their youth in bliss, and it's nothing but what it is. Just an act. Where the two characters differ, though, is how they deal with it. Hotaru is apathetic and proactive. He goes out of his way to expend the least amount of energy possible so that he can continue living his gray-colored life, while Hachiman is narcissistic and reactive, taking the acts of people face on and lashing out in retaliation. And that's why I think I enjoyed him so much as the protagonist. He's like that part of you in the back of your head that really wants to continually lash out against people for their continual bullshit, but never actually do. He doesn't always lash out, of course, he does have limits, but it's enough so that if you have a similar mindset, you can get on his side and agree with his methods, even if they tend to be extreme at times. Yukino, on the other hand, is an entirely different beast. In just the first season, we don't actually learn much about what makes her tick, other than this desire to solve problems efficiently, which I can assume is why she's in the volunteer service club to begin with. At times, she seems like she has something to prove, with a successful older sister, who the show likes to tell us was at times even more extraordinary than she was. Though, to Yukino's credit, she rarely lets that affect her actions or judgments. I never got the impression as well that she has a good life at home, which is probably why she is more distant and Ice Queen-like to her fellow students. Lastly, there's Yui, who serves a dual purpose. First, to be the bubbly airhead that the show can use as a scapegoat to explain things, as the other main characters are shown to be quite intelligent and you can't always assume that the audience is. And second, to fill out the romantic triangle between the three of them. Though admittedly, by the end of the first season, the romance between Yui and Hachiman just seems so much more likely to succeed. At least more so than the one between Hachiman and Yukino. You might have noticed, though, that I just said likely to succeed, which is to insinuate that by the end of season 1 there is no romantic payoff. Which is true. And this is weird for me considering the show has a title that roughly translates to My Teen Romantic Comedy. Oddly enough, though, I think that it worked. If they had attempted to force a one-sided confession or even properly started a relationship between two of the characters, it wouldn't have felt right. It would have felt forced. And ultimately, it would have just worked out horribly in the end. What they did do felt a lot more natural. And it gives me hope for the future of these characters. By future, I mean season 2, which I haven't watched yet. I'm getting to. Not all of the plots worked out well, however. At times, the show felt as if it was just coasting along for a few episodes and nothing really changed, so if you skipped a few episodes in the middle, you might not have even noticed. The actual growth of our characters seems to happen in a less traditional way as well, being that rather than change themselves, their perspectives of each other get challenged, and that's what seems to make them change and grow. But a natural flow is something that the show feels like it has. The situations that the character solves are believable. The humor that the show executes is well done, physical slapstick notwithstanding. And in the end, we are not left with a show that is just this mess of popular cliches and tropes, which I'm very thankful for. The art of the show is fairly generic, which is par for the course, but what I did find interesting, though, was the apparent change in character design from the manga to the anime. It's a small thing, but I recall images from the manga going out before the show aired, and some of the characters look quite a bit different. Though honestly, I think that actually fits the characters better, to be honest. The opening animation for the series as well is rather pleasant, though it is in some ways forgettable, considering that it too, in style at least, is fairly generic for the genre. The only thing interesting about it is the visual effects that it uses, which, to be fair, are quite unique. Now, Sentai Filmworks, in their infinite wisdom, decided not to give this series a dub with their home video release, which was probably for the best. One of the best things to me that this show has to offer is the dialogue between the characters, and to find a good dynamic in an English cast would have been very hard to do. Like, not impossible. They could have done it, but I'm glad they decided to skip it with this one. Because if they screwed it up, I would just have yet another Sentai dub to complain about. Overall, this is one of those weirdly feel-good anime that I wouldn't say is absolutely required watching. Like, the characters are good for a watch, if for nothing else than their banter alone, but as I mentioned, some of the stories do fall flat. Now also, as I've mentioned, I haven't watched the show's second season. This is not a review of the second season, just the first season, and in all honesty, if that second season has a story as good as this season's final arc, then that is definitely a leg up for both seasons in my mind, because that last arc for this one was really, really good. Like, the slowness in the middle bit is not going to stop me from recommending this series, it just stops me from recommending it as high as I could. And so with all that in mind, I present my teen romantic comedy SNAFU with the rating of buy it, as it is fairly cheap. even on Blu-ray. Speaking of, at the time of this video, SNAFU is available on DVD and Blu-ray from Sentai Filmworks. But for those wanting to watch it now, both this first and the unreviewed second season are up on Crunchyroll, if you happen to have access to that site. Link in the description, crunchyroll.com/glassreflection for a free trial of Crunchyroll's premium service, and all the anime awesomeness that it contains should you want it, though full disclosure, you will not need it for SNAFU. For ultimate anime recommendations, I first point you towards the aforementioned Hyoka, as in many ways they are similar, with a loner protagonist, a model student breaking him out of the shell, and a bunch of problems to solve. It's worth checking out. Second recommendation is a blind one, as I have yet to watch the series known as Haganai. From what I gather is almost identical in story structure, even more so than Hyoka is, so it too might be worth checking out. Again though, that second recommendation is blind, so your mileage may vary. And that's it for me. Please subscribe if you enjoyed the video, follow me on Twitter if you feel so inclined, and hey, if you like what I do here and feel like helping out, please consider going and checking out my Patreon page, and if you feel it within your heart, also consider donating. Very special thanks to Daniel Nye and Grace Anderson for donating already. You guys are awesome! Seriously, you guys are awesome. And until next time, ladies, gentlemen, and others, stay frosty.